Hello and welcome to another edition of On Our Terms, a video series by AIA Contract Documents. In this video, we're going to be discussing what we refer to as the correlation and intent of the contract documents. So in other words, when you have multiple documents that form the contract for construction, how do they work together? We'll also be addressing the question of whether the AIA contract documents have an order of precedence. My name is Mike Koger, and I'm joined by my colleague Jimmy Germano. We're both staff attorneys for the American Institute of Architects in Washington, D.C., and we work in the Contract Documents Department. As always, we can't give legal advice in this video, and nothing you hear in this video is a substitute for consulting with an attorney who is licensed in your jurisdiction who can talk with you about the specific issues that you are facing. And with that, Jimmy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. So, as Mike said, today we're going to be talking a little bit about what we refer to as the correlation and intent of the contract documents clause. This clause that you're seeing on your screen is found in a lot of our contract documents. I'm going to be referring to the one that's in the A201. That tends to be the more popular document. And in the A201, that's section 1.2, and specifically section 1.2.1. Section 1.2.1 is broken down into three parts, essentially. The first part is just the first sentence. So the first sentence talks about the intent of the contract documents, and their intent is to include all items that are necessary for the proper execution and completion of the work by the contractor. And what that means is it just explains that it is the intent of the parties when they enter into the agreement. So, for example, when they sign their A101 and their A201, it is their intent that everything they've included as contract documents are there to provide everything the contractor needs to properly execute and complete the work. That's what that sentence essentially says. The second part is this first clause of the second sentence. The contract documents are complementary, and what is required by one shall be binding as if required by all. What that means is that, as most people know, contract documents in the construction context contain more than just the agreement. It contains things like the specifications, the drawings, any addendum that are attached to the contract, any change orders, etc. And this part of section 1.2.1 essentially states that when you're looking at the sum total of all of these agreements, they are all supposed to be read as one cohesive set. And if one particular document has a requirement, you are to read all of the documents as having that same requirement. Lastly, the second clause of the second sentence talks about reasonably inferring items as being necessary to produce the indicated results. And what that means is essentially it's an acknowledgement that construction projects are incredibly complex, and the contractor is required to perform the work consistent with the contract documents and to perform anything reasonably inferable from those documents as being necessary to produce the indicated results. Essentially saying that on a complicated project or even a simple project, it may not be possible to include every single thing the contractor has to do to complete the work, and therefore it is up to the contractor to reasonably infer items that might not be specifically set out in the contracts and reasonably infer those things if they're necessary and consistent with the project.
Jimmy, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
One of the common misconceptions is that information within the specifications will take precedence over information found in drawings. Can you talk about how the drawings and specifications are supposed to work together and why having an order of precedence for those types of contract documents is not necessarily a good thing?
Sure, yeah. So it's a very common issue that arises. So to answer this, I think like an example would be good. So let's talk about like doors, for example. So if you have your drawings, a drawing of a one story or one room in a house might list the types of doors that are to be included and maybe their location. But it's not going to get into the specifics of the hardware that's supposed to be used, the screws, the bolts, how it's supposed to be hung on the jamb, the door frame, etc. That's when you get into the specifications, where you look in the specifications section when you're talking about hardware, and that gets into those. So if you had an order of precedence clause that said as a contractor, you first look to the drawings, and then you look to the specifications or vice versa. If you were to do that, and let's say the drawings took precedence over the specifications, then a contractor would be well within its right to only install a door with no hardware because the drawings didn't show hardware, but that hardware is included in the specifications. And if the specifications took precedence over the drawings, then the contractor could technically install only the hardware but no door because the specifications don't specifically say what type of door you're only to install, only the hardware. So that's why it's important to read all of these documents in a complementary manner to say, well, the drawings might include one aspect of the project, the door, and the specifications include the hardware, and you need to read those things together such that you have to install both. But if you want to include an order of precedence clause in your contract, you can look to the A503 document, which is the guide, supplementary conditions for the A201, and it includes model language for an order of precedence if you want to include one. And I've put that up on your screen here. It's important to note this first sentence of this model language, which would be included right below the order of precedent, or the correlation and intent clause that we just talked about. It's only triggered if there's a conflict or a discrepancy among the contract documents. So it still is not triggered unless there is a specific discrepancy. And you'll notice here, just as a quick aside, in subsection 7, drawings and divisions 2 through 49 of the specifications are in the same line item. So they are essentially to be read at the same time and given the same weight. So you might actually get to the same issue where your drawings include a door and your specific division might include the hardware, and that's when you look to the bottom paragraph and say, if there is a conflict between those two, then you maybe ask the architect for clarification in accordance with the other terms of the agreement. And with that, if you want to learn more, you can always visit our website, aiacontracts.org/learn, or send us an email at docinfo@aiacontracts.org. If you have a question about our online services, you can email us at techsupport@aiacontracts.org. And if you found this video helpful, then always feel free to subscribe on our YouTube channel and click the bell icon to be notified when we add new videos. And thanks very much.